Okay, folks, we're going to call the meeting to order, and I'd like approval of agenda for the February 22nd, 2000 meeting. Moved by Debbie, second by Doug. Any questions or comments on the agenda? All those in favor of the motion carried. Any conflict, pecuniary interest, or the general nature thereof? Showing none. I'd like the approval of the minutes of the February 7th, 2022 Snowmill regular council meeting. Moved by Kevin, second by Sherry. Any questions or comments on that? All in favor of the motion? Motion carried. Okay, we're going to staff reports. Manager stands Manager Development Services. You don't have nothing? So, okay, so we're going to Christina, the accounts payable.
So the report you have in front of you is for the month of January for all of the accounts payable, and I don't have anything in particular that I need to know.
Any questions for Christina? I'm looking for a motion to receive and pay the bill. Moved by Debbie, second by Doug. All in favor? Motion carried. Okay, we're dropping down to items for information, the 2022 municipal election policies and procedures. CEO Brooks, you want to take on that?
Your Worship, this is a report that we resubmit every 4 years. It's not necessarily for council approval, as the council members at this table could be candidates in the upcoming election, but we do include it on the agenda for items for information for both the candidate and public information. So included in the report, you'll see that the municipal election of 2022 is continuing with the 4 voting locations, voting alternatives are paper on election day and telephone and internet voting for the week prior to election day. Aside from that, the real change from the copy that was utilized in 2018 was the change of voting locations. One location in Yarker, moving from the fire hall to the library building that has the multi-purpose room, as well as changing from the fire hall in Tamworth to the community hall in Tamworth for the voting location. So aside from that, Your Worship, it's essentially same operation parameters, different dates, and the policies and procedures are in front of you for the 2022 election. Councils, if there's no questions, we would just like to get it received for information purposes so that it's on public record if anybody should choose to search the document.
Moved by Doug, seconder. Any questions, comments? All in favor of the motion? Motion carried. Any new business? New business statements from members? Except that's right over there. None? Oh, Jeff, yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, I would like to see the Township send a letter of congratulations to J.G. Horn, who, I'd like to see the Township of Stonemill send a letter of congratulations to Jay Dearhorn. He's a local Yarker boy, and he represented us well at the Olympics this year.
Okay, Doug. Second there. Sherry, all in favor? Motion carried. I'm just going to wait for Brenda, or sorry, Wendy gets situated here before we get into the budget details. You okay now, Wanda? Yes. Okay, good enough. Thank you. Okay, we got the 2022 budget discussion, and we'll go down to the branch. You want to start through that?
Your Worship, in the absence of considerable budgeting items this evening, I had requested permission from the Reeve last week to include the reports on the council agenda for direction to be received by management. So with approval from the Reeve, our intentions are, while we have all the managers here, is to discuss the 6 reports, any specific questions or inquiries pertaining to the report, or to allow council further discussion, as they were the individual projects that were specifically reported on. So all of the reports have technically been received and filed, just for receipt purposes. We would like to know if there's any further information required, or if there's any sort of direction that they would like to provide to the management team as part of the draft budget for 2022.
We can start with the top one. Anybody questions on the proposed 2A building?
Go ahead, Joe.
Just one, Brian, is this that go out to the papers and it's advertised? I can't remember how you work that.
So our HR policy requires a 10-day posting for it to be internal at the same time as being external. If there is a time-sensitive issue to that posting, then they would do those concurrently at the same time. And the policy states that any individual in-house, like an internal candidate, would receive consideration prior to any external candidate if they should be deemed qualified.
Thank you.
Any more questions on that category? Go with Debbie, then we'll go to Doug.
Just wondering, CDO, if the new building inspector will work under your direction, or you'll have specific duties of his own that he'll be responsible for?
Councillor Thompson, it's your phone that's causing the interference with the radio. If you just move it away from that.
Don't have to leave.
Yes, I'm under the assumption that the new building inspector will work under my direction. As also in developmental services director Jason Sands as well. I have no idea who the selected candidate might be, but there's a good chance that they would actually need training, and they would have to still write tests. They would have to be probably trained by me as to how to become a building inspector and what my job entails.
Go ahead, Doug.
Well, Jake, you touched on what I was gonna ask. My question was, would this entry-level position be completely trained when the candidate is successful here, or would we have to finish out his training? And so you don't know, do you have the job description printed up yet?
No, we don't have a job description printed out, and really, until we actually get a field of candidates in front, it's really difficult to know what level of education or what level of building knowledge potential a new employee will have. Thank you, Your Worship.
No, okay, I think we should at least have some type of expectation before we advertise, should we not? What level he would have, like certain parts of the training or certain experience.
So right now they're looking for somebody in central North Frontenac to be just a chief building official. That's all they have there. They posted, I think it was 80,000, and they received 0 resumes. So that's why it's difficult right now to anticipate. You can write that you want this, but you might get none of that in, when it all works out. That's why I'm anticipating that you may need to train whoever we hire.
I fully understand that. There's very few positions that you don't have to do some training, but I think we also should have some decent representation. You know, for example, when you were hired, from Loyalist, I mean, you had some training before you come here, yeah? Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we'll write all of that down, but I'm just, I think reasonably, my expectation is we might not get all of those boxes checked.
Brian wants something to say, then we'll go to Linda.
So Councilor Davison, when we post the position for a building inspector, there's always an expectation that we list the training that's preferred. So we would have, you know, the building code legal, we'd have, you know, maybe septic gate, maybe small buildings as a baseline as to what we would prefer, recognizing that there's a possibility that you end up with a candidate that's the preferred candidate that may have less than the training, and the recommendation may be to start at the bottom of the grid, or somebody that may be overqualified and therefore they may be looking for the top of the grid. So it's very important, especially in this field, to what CBO Dattler had indicated. When we issue these postings, we have to be aware that we may receive applicants that are maybe exceeding expectations, maybe by location. It might be preferred to work here, but we also have to acknowledge that we may be looking at investing in an individual to get them trained due to shortage of applications. So to answer your question, as the person that would usually create the posting, the qualifications are listed as preferred, with the idea that here's the basic expectations that we have coming into the position, and then anything over and above that would be deemed an additional asset for the position. So we would discuss with Manager of Development Services and CBO to lay out the minimum requirements, which I assume may be supporting Part 8, maybe supporting, you know, small building, plumbing, whichever the preference or the pressure is. We would include those as a baseline, or at least building code qualifications, so that we would get some sort of an idea as to the qualifications to the candidate coming through the door. But for all of council and to be forward and transparent, is there is a real good candidate that we, or a possibility that we could get a candidate that requires to be trained, may have some experience that may require training. Likewise, there is an opportunity that we might get somebody that's, you know, looking to downsize or get closer to home or something of those locations that may require us to look at starting them at the top of the grid. It's really a coin toss as to what we might get for applicants based on the limited number of people looking for jobs or willing to move inside that field right now.
Go ahead, Wanda.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I believe that CAO Brooks addressed my question, but I want to come back just a little bit to Doug's, and that is, I do think you need a job description piece of paper that you're going to put in your folder to say, in your binder of all your jobs, this is what this person preferably will be doing. You know, I've never applied for a job where somebody didn't hand me the job description to look over while I was having my interview. So I just think a posting is one thing, but you need to make sure that that takes on the meaning of a job description that is flexible and meets your needs and has a lot of use of the word preferred in it.
Okay, so you stick it.
Sure, Yuri. Thank you for that commentary, Councilor Lalonde. I believe CBO Dattler may have inferred that we would in fact have that for the posting. Just in fact, it doesn't exist to date. We're waiting to, you know, proceed through the budgetary process in advance of providing additional works and insights into creating that job description and or posting, but it most definitely will be done. Thanks.
Okay, with that being said, any more questions on that part of the budget? Because that was some discussion that we had in there. Everybody comfortable with that? Okay, fine. So we will move on to the next one. Staff report, ice, water. I'm sorry.
So the request that I have for council, and just before we leave that topic, if it's okay, we're nearing the end of February. Is it something that council would consider actually approving to allow us to post that, so that we can extend our notification period and increase the potential that we actually get exposure to candidates that may be willing to relocate? You know, ideally we would be listing for, you know, somewhere to 4 to 6 weeks, just because of the limited applicants, but if it's something that council's in support of, we would like to get a head start on it, to get the person active in time for the upcoming development season.
Sherry, you had a comment, question?
I just wasn't sure how we were dealing with each one, but I wanted to see if I could make a motion to accept and support.
Fair enough, a seconder? Were you going to, when you had your hand up there, okay? Doug, you have something more to comment? No? Okay. Any questions? All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, go to the ice water rescue. James or somebody want to talk about that? Any information?
Good evening, everyone. I can answer any questions you may have about that report.
Any questions on that report? We talked about the other night. Nothing, so can somebody make a motion that we, second by Kevin, all in favor? Carried. Staff report, building controls, and I think James is gonna have something to say about this here. Go ahead, James.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So we recognize that the cost price tag of the entire project is quite substantial. So after speaking with staff in-house, we've proposed that perhaps we could look at doing one building, hopefully the Public Works building, on a sort of pilot project basis, to sort of start off with this project to see if it's a viable option for us and something we may want to move forward with in the future. So we would propose that an allocation of, so we have a quoted allocation of $12,100 plus HST for the Public Works building. So we may want a slightly larger allocation just with recent pricing increases with technology. But that's what we would be proposing rather than the full amount. I do have a cost breakdown of each building if council would like to discuss that as well.
Okay, what the council want to do? I know James and I had a discussion that, and they seemed to tell me that the main concern was the building over here. Anybody have a question? Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I was opposed to doing all the buildings just for the fact of the cost issue. And you can buy a lot of keys for $50-some thousand. But after listening to James, I think the halls, there's not a lot in there. Somebody just could go in there and steal something anyway. Let's face it, there's not a lot of valuables in there. But this building over here, on the other hand, is chock full of tools and everything that anybody would steal and sell, quite frankly. So yeah, I'm not opposed to that. I hope that you're going to get tenders on it and we get the lowest cost. But I think doing this building is probably prudent. You can control who's in and out of it and what's going on over there. So I'm good with that, and I'll make the motion.
Okay. John, you have something to say? No, we need a second on the motion first.
I'll second the motion, but
Okay.
I think you have to be clear that this doesn't cost us anything, whether it's $12,000 or $50,000.
Sorry?
It costs us nothing, whether it's $12,000 or $50,000. It's just all provincial grant money, so it has no effect on our tax rate. And a pilot project's fine. I guess the question is, what happens to the balance of that money? How long can we hold that? If we decide the pilot project is great, this is a tremendous benefit, will those funds still be available? What's the time limit on those funds?
What's going to handle that? Go ahead, Brian.
There is no timelines, there is no restrictions, there's no restrictions for council to consider. It's the only thing that the provincial government is tracking is what we chose to do with the funds. So we would essentially keep a list of projects that we did. It's important from our treasurer that not only are we tracking what we did, but we're also tracking what efficiencies, modernization, efforts were considered as part of that. So that's just an internal tracking system, but there's no, sunset clause on this funding. It's there for municipal use. The province is just interested in what the priorities were. I suspect so that in the future, when there's any changes to funding, they can say that this is the funding they provided us to prepare for these types of moments.
So we have that money now then? So the remainder is just in reserve essentially. So we can either augment this project or come up with other ones. That's fine. I have no problem with it.
The money has been received, Your Worship, since 2019, and it's been sitting essentially in increasing the cash balance of the municipality, gaining interest on it until which time there's a project that's been identified to utilize this funding.
Any more questions on that? So we have a motion, you made a motion that we're gonna do the public works bill. Okay, all in favor of that motion? Motion carried. Thank you. Got off the page, or you go ahead, Brian?
So, Your Worship, the next one is simply the community vibrancy funding, which I think the report was relatively self-explanatory as far as the 48-6 and the one-third allocation. Just as part of the budget process, I did want to draw the attention to the reserve contribution that was coming to support the Tamworth Medical Center. There will be a report coming to council in the near future. We do have some, the tender closed for that project last week. And so we will have a report coming to council within the next 30 days to highlight the outcome of that tender. But it does, at initial glance for council consideration, it does appear that we will have to further contribute to that project with additional reserve dollars. I wouldn't say it's anything drastic or substantial, but it is something that will be forthcoming. Just without that recommendation here this evening and know what vendor is being selected, we don't know what that value is.
Any questions for Ryan on that? Go ahead, Kevin.
I'll just make a motion. Make a motion by Kevin, second by Sherry. Any questions? All in favor?
All in favor of the motion? Motion carries. Quinny Conservation Capital Reserve Contribution Report.
Your Worship, again, this was an information report that was provided to council with regards to the 10-year capital plan. With the endorsement of council, we've already had internal discussions with the CAO of Quinny Conservation indicating that we've received it. So we intend to send a letter to Quinty or acknowledgement just acknowledging that we've received their request and that we will continue to allocate reserves based on this schedule, but that we'll be holding those. And if they could continue to communicate with any upcoming projects, that we would appreciate that so that we could adjust our budget as necessary.
Any questions? Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, question. Sorry, question for John. If John can just give us a little more understanding on these three projects and the timeline of them, like Bell Rock Dam, 13 Islands Dam, and the third depot repair work. John, do you have any timelines or anything for what possibly going has there?
It'll depend on whether we get the 50% funding, the WECI funding, the water erosion control infrastructure funding. That's the 50% funding that comes from Ministry of Natural Resources. I don't think there's any, those applications have been put in as far as I understand. And so there's no timeline until we find out if we get those grants done.
So all three of them put in no prioritization, which one is higher priority?
That's almost up to them. They'll judge based on the parameters and specs that we supply them, which they regard as the most important. And assuming we get them all funded, then we can decide which ones we'll do first. It's more likely we only get one or two funded, and then we'll decide on the priority at that point.
Then we would have to prioritize and put one forward, not three all at once. So, okay, I'm just concerned about that.
This government is different.
Any more questions on that? Everybody satisfied to have a motion for report? Moved by Debbie, seconded by Sherry. All in favor? Motion carried. The next is the 2022 draft municipal tax rate comparison. Okay, sorry, Jason. So, okay, after you go that.
Thank you, Reed Smith. I apologize for interrupting the flow. I just wanted to bring specific attention to the first report that was discussed this evening with respect to the building inspector position. And I know it was already discussed as it relates to the specific addition of potentially a new staff member and getting a head start on the public advertisement and job creation component of that. But I'd like to just assure that there's been council consideration given to all the recommendations that were included within that staff report. And the third recommendation within that report pertained to the internal transfer of vehicles amongst Public Works Department versus the Building or the Development Services Department. Again, that's essentially an internal transfer to bring over an existing F-150 vehicle to the Development Services Department based on emergency services and lighting. It's already applicable, and we believe a cost-saving mechanism that would then allow the Public Works Department to tender out a new half-ton vehicle. So again, I just wanted to make sure that that was considered, and if it was not, I request that it be, just so that we could potentially get a head start or jump start on putting that out for tender as well. Thank you very much.
Everybody okay with that? Yep. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I was reading that, Jason and Jeff, is that a 4x4 truck that's coming over? And you're looking at a 4x4 to buy for that, for your department.
Through you, your worship, that's correct. Both would be four-wheel drive.
Thank you. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, Jason, this is maybe the best time there is to bring this up. We're talking about the building inspector hire and CDO Detler's position. This year on the budget, CDO Detler has got a immense workload going on with the project on the barns, the project in the arena, and I believe there's another small project that goes along with that. I'm just wondering, when the tender is drawn up, it will include a person to be on site, monitoring the work, because Jake's too busy to be trying to monitor the work.
Through you, your worship, Councilor Davidson, great point or question. I'm not going to speak specifically to that project oversight. I'll let CBO Detler do so. However, I do want to mention that we've identified 7 capital projects amongst staff, and all 7 of those have been divested amongst our management team to ensure that there's a level of oversight to each of those site projects that's not burdening one staff member. So there's been an attempt amongst the department heads to ensure that that's been completed. But you do speak of the project next door here with respect to the Public Works Garage, and that has been considered by Public Works CBO Detler, so he can most definitely speak to it better than I.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, your worship. So in terms of me doing regular required building inspections on both the arena project and the project here at the Public Works Office, my plan was to have Michael Knowles, professional engineer and CEO of Napanee, do those regular inspections. Given that I've kind of organized the work, it makes sense for me to have somebody else coming in and doing those inspections. Both projects, the one that you're referencing here, we're paying Greer Galloway $21,000 to oversee the project. Now, to Doug's point, it's bi-weekly meetings, site meetings. It's not somebody there every day from Greer Galloway. We paid them a total of $44,000 to manage the project. Surely, if you were going to have somebody there all day, every day, it would cost more than that. Again, that's $21,000, and I'll be going there and attending site meetings as the client and representing council as the client. But that will be my level of project management. We're paying the consultants to be the project managers, and we're paying Peter T. Niches to be the consultant of the project, and provide the construction management. I just don't know what else to say.
Okay, my point is this though, Jake. I mean, and the reason probably we're doing this project is we didn't have somebody doing quality control on the last one, so we're spending a pile of money to upgrade it now on that. But I'm not saying somebody has to be there every minute, but usually Greer Galloway, somebody like that, you're right, they chair meetings, but they're not out there doing quality control. Somebody has to be available, at least part-time, to follow up that the installation is being done properly, that all the work is completed properly before it's closed up and you can't see it any longer. It has to be inspected. And I don't believe that you have the time for that. So I really believe they need to identify somebody that can be here at least enough time to do that quality control work. And then, of course, any maintenance plans have to be developed afterwards.
So, through your worship, so in terms of the insulation, just if it was any project, they can't not insulate it correctly, on any project, without, just the regular building code inspections, ensuring that project is properly insulated.
You don't want to get in a debate, but we had a building inspector inspect the last one and it didn't get done, okay? So that's my concern, is that it be done, and we're not spending $500,000 again to correct it in 10 years' time. So that's my position on it. We need somebody there, quality control.
Through your worship, our role in this is just to be the owner. We don't have a role. I mean, we're paying another professional engineering company to do that work, to make sure that it's done correctly. I wasn't around for how it got built originally, and I can't speak to that. But I have confidence in the way that we're proceeding. It's going to get, the problems will get fixed. It's the best. Our ability to fix them.
I'll just point one more out that all I'm saying is clarify with Greer Galloway that they're gonna have somebody do the inspection. That needs to be done.
Through your worship, yeah, I mean, we're paying them $21,000 to do the inspections.
Yeah, just like back, we did the arena back there years ago, and I think Dell come in and we hired a person for that, like that project manager, right, John? And, we hadn't been in trouble back there. So I mean, I don't know what happened over there or what, but anyway, I just looking at project to be done, and we hired that project, and it's our expense on that building and however long that's been done. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents here. Right. You want to say something on that? You said.
Just before we got into the specifics on that project, I wanted to ease council's mind somewhat in the sense that through the management team, we've set up leads, support, financial supporting roles to each other so that, one person doesn't have, 5 projects on them while 2 others are doing their day-to-day business. So it is very much a team approach, trying to get each project lead the support they need from other staff. Maybe to turn our attention to what Councillor Davison is speaking is, we have what we would say is an internal project. We have a manager that's responsible for the properties, and that would essentially be our project manager. He's not going to be overseeing the project, but he's the person that would be consulting with whoever the site supervisor is that's established by the successful tender, as well as any concerns would be issued to Greer Galloway. So we will have somebody in communication. Any of the concerns that we have, we can also share with Greer Galloway as far as, wanting to ensure inspections and installation accuracies, et cetera, and share our expectations with them. But I do concur with Jake that, as part of the budget that's been listed, we do not have, incorporated in that budget somebody that's on site, signing off on installations, et cetera. It was discussed that Jake would be more at arm's length and be able to have that oversight mentality while including those building inspections from the town of Greater Napanee, so that it's another set of eyes and approval on the installation of those, including the building code. So, and there's no cost to have those applications, I believe, with Greater Napanee, as we have that mutual assist program that quite honestly, I think that Napanee has utilized our staff slightly more, and I think that they'd be happy to exist on this project to make sure that Jake had some redundancy and some support on the project management side. But we hear you loud and clear, Councillor Davis, and we certainly don't want to be back at the table dealing with the same issues, but I think if I may just separate what the examples were versus the construction, is some of the issues that we're looking at and the deterioration is due to conflicting designs. It wasn't that, say, insulation wasn't done correctly, it was that condensation is deteriorating the insulation now. So that's what we're trying to accomplish as part of this construction. So, but we hear the message loud and clear from council, and we'll do whatever we can to ensure that those inspections and that project management is to the extent as much as we can. If council wishes to have somebody on site, then that would be an additional expense that's not been included.
Okay, anything else on that? Thank you. Okay, we'll move forward to our 2022 draft municipal tax rate comparison. Go ahead, Christina, if you want to.
Certainly. This is strictly on the municipal tax rate component, not including the education county, because I don't have those figures yet. Well, I have the education, it's not changing. Right now with the current 1.77% increase on the tax rate, it's going to equate to $10.83 for every 100,000. So the average household assessment of $228,000 is going to pay about $24 more.
Any questions for Christine on this? And it's all on the chart there, I guess, their numbers. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
So Christine, you're saying it's going to go up more than that because you haven't got, what was it you didn't have? You had the education one?
So according to what I have, education will stay the same, and I don't know what the county rate is going to be.
So the county that.
Whatever they, yeah, so usually at the county, you have the education, so that's what your total tax bill is. Without the county rates, I can't tell you what the overall would be, but right now the municipal portion would be what you see there, either the roughly $24 on an average household assessment.
So the county levy and the education will be added later.
Yes, once we receive those figures.
Thank you.
Councillor Richmond, the province has froze the education levy.
Yes, correct.
So there is no increase coming from the province for the education.
No, that would be added.
Yeah, there's nothing on that. There's nothing coming. It's zero. It's just whatever the county does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think the county should be too long before they break it down what we do.
Oh, but the next meeting, right now, the county's looking at about 3.5%, but we haven't gone into any details about where they might cut that. There's a few special projects, just like we went through now, that staff is requesting, and we've kind of approved those in principle, but we haven't passed the budget yet.
We have a meeting tomorrow night, I think it's back into the budget. Okay, any questions on the tax thing before we move on? Everybody understand it and comfortable with it? Okay. And motion to accept that report. Sherry, Debbie, all in favor? Carried. So with that being done, Brian, let's do all our budget things here. What are you looking for council here?
So, Your Worship, that's essentially the conclusion of the reports that we took from the budget meetings that have been held so far. Assuming from that there's general expectation that the budget is in close proximity to where we are. There's two things. One, we're looking for direction as to whether council wishes to meet again to discuss any additional things, or whether there's an appetite for council, which we've always encouraged, to put this out as a draft 2022 budget for community input, or just to allow it to be posted in advance of the passing of the budget, just for accountability, transparency perspectives. That way anybody would, typically we would provide, you know, if it's the 22nd of February today, I'm not sure what the date of our council meeting is, but I believe it's the 21st of March. We would put it out and we would provide any sort of comments that we received by, say, March 21st, with the intent of trying to have it passed by the first week of our first council meeting of April.
Does anybody have any concerns about that? Any questions on it? Right, Gavin.
Maybe it's just me, but I'd like to see us run through it all again before we put it out to the public for a draft. And because just for our own well-being, our own sakes. So yeah, I'd like to say, I'd like to see us have one more meeting, and then we can just go through it, and it may be a very quick one, but just so we've got everything in their ducks in a row, and then put it out for the people to have a look at, and then go from there. Just wonder how everybody else feels.
Anybody else? Any comments on it? Go ahead, John.
I have no objection to that, but I'm comfortable with it as presented. I think it's a responsible assessment by staff of what we need. It's not a wish list or anything like that. I think we've been through it pretty thoroughly, especially these special projects. So I don't feel the need for another meeting, but I'm not discounting it.
I would just like, I mean, I want everybody around this table to be comfortable, understand, but through it. So I mean, I have problem with the meeting either. I mean, like I say, if you want to do it. Anybody else, any comments on that? Do we need a motion if we want to have another meeting?
Gary? If I could, if everybody's comfortable with it, I'll go with that. That's fine. I can sit at home and read through it again myself. No, that's why I put it out there, because if everybody's comfortable with it, say so, and let's move on. I don't want another meeting for me. I can go through it myself as well. So I'll just leave it at that. See where.
But I think it's fair, if you're not comfortable, you want to go through it. This is what this council should do. I mean,
no, it's not necessary. Mr. Reed, I'm not really uncomfortable with it. I just thought it might be a good idea to just run through it again before we put it out to the public. But if everybody's comfortable with that, I'm okay with that. That's why I put it out there, just to get the feeling of the room. I hear John, and whatever everybody else thinks, let's move on if that's what everybody wants to do.
I'm going to put it this way, look for a motion to have another meeting or to not have another meeting. That way we can. Go ahead, John.
Well, I don't know if we need a motion to not have a meeting, but I would move that we accept the budget in principle, subject to having a draft presented to us, and at the next meeting of council. When did you say that was, Brian? At the March meeting.
March 7th is the first council meeting.
Yeah.
In March.
Yeah, so between now and then, we can, if any questions come up in our mind, we can forward them to staff, and if someone isn't satisfied with the answers they're getting, they can request for me to call another meeting. If there's no problem, then we can have a look at that draft at the March meeting.
Okay. Motion by John, second by Sherry. Any more questions, comments on that? So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion? Motion, any opposed? More opposed, okay. Good enough. So motion is carried. That's it, isn't it? Okay, we have a confirmation bylaw by Sherry, second by Debbie. All in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn. John, Linda, all in favor? Carried. Thanks, everybody.